All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the RTS Guided Programming Coaching Call. I'm Mike Tushir, as always, and we're going to be talking about guided programming and answering all your questions for this week. So thanks, everyone. First of all, thanks, everyone, for bearing with me last week while I was on a trip. Yeah, it wasn't real easy to get everything answered last week, but thanks for hanging in there and bearing with me anyway. Answering questions on the train is definitely not ideal, but this week we're back in action and should be able to get everything caught up. So let's just jump right into it. Let's start off by answering questions regarding executing the workout. This seems to be a good place for us to start. So the first question, if I've never done an exercise before, should I just kind of feel my way up to the top set? So let's kind of work from an example. Let's say that you've never done a pin press before, so you don't really know what weights you should be using. The first thing I would do is kind of take an educated guess. If you're doing, let's say, a pin press from chest level, you know it's probably going to be a little bit harder than your normal bench. So I would figure out, like, if I was going to do a normal bench for the same rep range, what kind of weights would I be using? And like once you get that figured out, you know the pin press is going to be a little bit harder. So then you can make some adjustments. You can dial back the weights a bit. 10% would be, way on the safe side. Well, 10% would be on the safe side, I think. And then, keep in mind that your first work set is so if your target RPEs, like let's say it's a triple at a 9, so your first work set's going to usually be like a triple at a 7. So you're going to dial it back even more from there. So you're going to be starting on the conservative side, and you'll work your way up to it. But that, I guess what I'm getting at is that you can still make this an educated guess. You can still make this a process where, you have an idea, even if it's not a really well-formed idea. But yeah, the general process is to kind of work your way up to it. Now, what if it's a completely different exercise that you really don't have any basis for? Let's take an example of like a hip thrust. Let's say you've never done it before and you have no idea. It's not related to any exercise that you've done in the past. So what do you do in a situation like that? Well, then you really would just kind of guess and ramp up slowly. Once you get up there a ways, I would tend to rep out. So let me pull up my trusty notepad here and draw up an example of what I'm talking about. So what that might look like, let's say that you start with, let's say that the goal is hip thrust for 8 reps at a 9 RPE, and you really have no idea what this is going to be. So you start out with 225 for 8, and it's really difficult to judge RPE in situations like this because you don't know. But we're going to take a guess and say that that's like a 7 RPE, but we're just guessing. So we'll go up like 5 to 10%. So in a situation like this, maybe let's say we go to 240 for 8, and that's maybe a little bit harder. It's 7.5 RPE. So you can take a little bit bigger jump on your next one. So at this point, you could go, what's that, math in public? It's 255. Yeah, so we'll go 255 for 8. Let's say that's a little bit harder. Again, 8 RPE. So you can see that we're taking bigger jumps than you normally would, and the RPE isn't going up like we would expect. This happens pretty commonly when we're working with a completely new exercise. So something you could do at this point would be to take a slightly heavier weight, heavier still, let's say 265 or 270 even, and then just do as many reps as possible. And let's say you get 15 on this set. In this case, you would know, well, hey, my RPEs are not very accurate, and that's not uncommon for a completely new exercise on a completely new movement pattern. It's also going to help you adjust your weights the next time, and it'll help you adjust your weights for any down sets that you do. So it's definitely not an option of first recourse, but if you're in a situation where you need to figure out, what level of performance are you at, then it's an option. So just a little trick to keep in mind. All right. So the next question that we've got for executing the workout, are we still aiming for 20 or 30 minute time limits for each exercise, even if we're doing 4 repeats? So if you have 4 repeat sets, that means there's 7 work sets. A 30-minute time limit can be kind of tough for that, especially if we're talking squats or deadlifts. So I wouldn't limit yourself to that, but the point is to keep the rest periods under control. Basically, if you're having this question, then no, you don't need to limit yourself to that 20 or 30 minutes. Keep in mind that's just kind of a ballpark. The difference between 20 and 30 minutes for a time slot is pretty significant. So it's just a general guideline to begin with. So you don't have to cut it off at 30 minutes, but just don't let your rest intervals get out of control. Next question we've got says, what do we do if we overshoot our target RPE? Or what do we do if we undershoot our target RPE? So if you overshoot your target RPE, how do you adjust for that on the down sets? If you overshoot by just a little bit, let's say the target is a 9 RPE, and what you really ended up doing was a 9.5 RPE, you can just make a small adjustment. Take an extra 2% off the bar, from what you would otherwise normally do, and just continue on from there. If you undershoot the RPE, you adjust the other way. Let's say you undershoot by a half a RPE. Should you do another workup set? Well, probably not. A half RPE is pretty close, and that's within our tolerance. So if let's work from another example. If the target RPE is a 9 RPE, and you do your top set, and it's really like an 8.5 RPE. Normally we would say, well, that's pretty close, and it's probably close enough. So you would just continue on and go into your down sets. You would make a note of it and adjust your down sets accordingly. You would adjust your weights for the next occurrence of that exercise accordingly, and so on. Now, if you undershoot your RPE by a whole RPE or more, then yeah, you probably want to do an additional workup set. So if your target RPE is let's say a triple at a 9 RPE, and your top set's really a triple at an 8 RPE, yeah, you probably want to do another workup set. So just something to keep in mind for that. Let's see, that was it for executing the workout. Let's talk a little bit about program modifications. I do high bar squats because I can't do low bar yet due to mobility issues. Can I replace the front squats that are written in the program with more high bar work? Now, basically, I don't recommend it. The front squats are in there for a reason, and they're kind of built into the program as part of an overall stress management tool, as well as weakness correction and so forth. So I wouldn't recommend just replacing front squats with more high bar work, especially since high bar work is your competition work. The the thing is, like if you were a low bar squatter, it would be a bit more of a valid option because it's still not hyper specific, and we at the slot that we have programmed for front squats, we don't need or necessarily even want to get hyper specific. Since you are a high bar squatter, this is more true because at this point in the annual plan, we don't want to replace that with more high specificity work. There will be a time and place for that. It's just not right now. Let's see, last week I was sick and got in no downsets. Then for this week's training, I'm better, but there are no downsets planned. Should I make any modifications? Yes, you can make a modification. Basically, just do the same downsets that were planned for last week. Just do them this week instead. Keep the rest of the programming the same, but basically it's just going to mean slightly increased volume for this week. Now, last week would serve as your deload week. Even though you were sick, I would imagine that you feel more healthy, that your soreness has gone away, joint stiffness has gone away. If that's not the case, then I would consider sticking to the program as it's written. But provided that you're feeling good, you're feeling healthy, then yeah, I see no problem in continuing on, in flipping the volumes like that. That should be no problem. How would you go about implementing bands in the squat or in the bench? Well, let's take these one at a time. If we have, let's talk about squatting first. In the current stage of our annual plan, so in this training cycle that we're doing right now, if you have squats with a belt twice in a given week, you can sub out that second session of squatting with a belt for squats with bands. The reason is it'll be a good overload stimulus, and that's appropriate for this stage of our training. If we have something else scheduled in there, basically if squat with a belt is only scheduled for once per week, then you should not use bands that week. We have other things that we're trying to accomplish. For bench, you have a little bit more latitude. You can substitute some of the overload work, some of the partial range of motion work for bench with bands. Don't do all of it though. Don't do band benches at all times, but if you wanted to take out every other board press and do band bench instead, that would be fine. That should not be a problem. Kind of a related question, how would I incorporate the slingshot into this training? Basically, it would be a substitute for board work. Now, the slingshot in particular is higher specificity than I don't know. I want to say higher specificity than something like a band bench, but it's really difficult to compare those two directly. So it does allow you to handle heavier weights than a band bench typically, and I feel that it's more stressful in general, although that gets controlled pretty well in a program like this. Even so, if you want to incorporate the slingshot into this training cycle, basically it would be a substitute for board work, but you don't want to substitute all the board work. I would recommend only substituting board work, basically only doing the slingshot the last 4 to 6 weeks before the competition date. So if you're within the last 4 to 6 weeks, you can drop whatever board work is in your program and do slingshot benching instead, basically. So that's all for program modifications. We have one scheduling question, so let's handle that one next. This one says, I'm training for a push-pull competition. Should I keep the deadlifts as priority 4 work, or should I move them to some other slot? And for this one, yeah, you can move those to a different slot. Basically, if you're training for a push-pull, of course we want to continue to squat. It's important for long-term development. It helps enhance our deadlift, and so on and so on. There's a lot of good reasons for maintaining your squat if it's at all possible. Now I know you're clearly doing that. The question then becomes, if you're going to compete in the deadlift but not the squat, the deadlift is then more important. So I would make sure that I'm getting my deadlift workout in. I would have the deadlift workout be a higher priority than the squat workout at that point. The reason it's not normally that way is that if we are competing in both the squat and the deadlift, then competitively they're of equal value. So you're better off squatting because of the transference effects. But if you're not going to compete in the squat, then that math comes out a little bit differently. Let's talk a little bit about track questions. This track question says, for this week's training, I'm scheduled for no down sets. If track told me to reduce the sets, what do I do? If track tells you to reduce the sets, kind of the standard stock answer would be to reduce the sets. So if you have no down sets to reduce, you would reduce from the top sets. So let's say it tells you to drop 2 work sets. You would drop the top set and the set immediately before it. So basically that's only 1 work set for that week, or for that session rather. Now that's only an option I would use if I was feeling pretty darn beat up. If you're feeling okay and you're feeling up to it, your motivation to train is good enough, then I would go ahead and do all the scheduled work, do the full workup, but having no down sets is going to reduce your volume and reduce your training load anyway, so you should start recovering better. Yeah, so it becomes a bit more of a judgment call if you already have a situation where there's no sets to reduce. Similarly, if you're in a deload week, you have no down sets scheduled, and track says to increase the sets, then yeah, I would increase them. If you're working at an 8 RPE, I would do some repeats. If you're working at a 9 RPE, I would do some load drops. But yeah, just increase your sets if track says to increase them. You'll still, if you're recovering faster than normal, you'll still be able to get the deload effect, and you'll still be able to improve, how we expect you to improve. So we have some GPP questions. This first one says, why have abs and rows gone from 10 minutes down to 7 minutes? And basically that's part of the change in annual plan. At this point in the annual cycle, we're taking a little bit less emphasis on abs and rows and placing a little bit more emphasis on other things. We're trying to spend our recovery energy on other things. So, there's just not a whole lot of answer I can go into on that one without kind of getting into a lot of theory behind what we're doing for GPP. I will say that the overall idea is that early in the annual plan, we're using GPP workouts to build our capacity. We're trying to build up our ability to tolerate training and recover from training. Later on, we're going to get rid of large chunks of GPP work and do more passive recovery stuff. The goal shifts from building capacity to enhancing capacity. So instead of building our ability to tolerate work, we're going to use the ability that we've already built and try to enhance it further. So that's why we would stop doing stuff like rows, abs, energy system work. We're going to want to use all available recovery resources on, recovering from the big training stuff. We're going to do passive recovery modalities to enhance the recovery capacity that we've already built, and use this to bring about bigger and bigger peaks to our training as we progress through the annual cycle. So that will come later, but for now, the reason that's why is that we're kind of on this long-term progression. We're progressing through this, so you'll see some shifts slowly to your GPP work. Next GPP question says, I do 2 days of conditioning work that lasts about 45 minutes, for example, ladder drills, jump ropes, sled pulls. Can I just plug those days in to fulfill my GPP requirement? Yeah, you can. I would just be cognizant of your heart rate when you do those. If you can, adjust the intensity to try to meet the heart rate demands for the GPP as it's planned. It is planned with a reason. It's planned with a purpose. So if you can set that up so that you're meeting that intent, I think that would be better. You know, if we're going for, you know, aerobic development or aerobic maintenance, if you can get yourself into that zone, you're going to meet more of the intent of the GPP workout. Now, with that said, well, yeah, that's about all I wanted to say on that. So, yeah, just plug your heart rate in and make sure that you're getting your heart rate in that zone. And for anyone else who kind of has some questions on the GPP end, if you can basically do whatever exercise or movement that you want. If you want to run, jog, swim, that's fine. If you would rather do a barbell circuit or an interval or sled pulling or jumping rope, that stuff is fine too. The idea is just to get your heart rate where it needs to be, maintain it for the required amount of time, and that way you can get the energy system adaptation that we're going for. Now, some kind of miscellaneous questions now. So the first one says, squatting anything over an 8 RPE, the bar tends to roll down my back a little bit. Do you have any ideas on how to help this? I have a couple ideas. I'm not sure, I'm not like proof positive that any of these are going to help you, especially without seeing what you're doing. The first would be to chalk up your back. That might help to keep that bar in place. If you're not using a bar that has a strong center knurling, I would consider doing so. But yeah, a little bit of chalk can help. Also, don't pull your elbows down quite so hard, especially at the top. If you're doing this, like if you're really cranking those elbows, especially at the top, you can kind of eliminate the shelf that you need for the bar to sit on. I'm not sure that you're doing that. That's just totally a guess. So if I'm wrong, feel free to send in a video and we'll see if we can come up with something else for you. All right, I'm going to just read this next question to you guys, and then we'll dig into it a little bit more. It says, for the last 4 weeks, I've gotten really sick twice. Both times felt like a stomach bug, maybe food poisoning, you know, bad times, and then no energy, no training for days after. My diet hasn't changed. What has changed is the weights that I'm lifting and my you know, load at work. I'm a personal trainer. I'm up to about 35 sessions a week, which is a lot of time on my feet. It's with a full training workload. I haven't been using track, but I'm going to start, and that way I'll be able to see if I need to recover more. My strength is still improving, but I'm running out of gas. I do the conditioning work every week, so I don't think it's cardio. Do you have any ideas? There's a lot here, and that's why I wanted to make sure I read the whole thing to you. The first thing is track's not going to be a huge help to you if you start it at this point. If you start track after you already have a problem, track is not going to be able to diagnose that problem for you. Basically, the way that track works is it recognizes what's normal for you, and it's going to see deviations from that normal and make recommendations. So you don't necessarily need a baseline, you know, a rest week or anything like that to establish a pattern. Track is going to pick it up, you know, naturally over time as you go. Track is going to figure it out. So I would definitely start using track, but just keep in mind that it's not going to be reliable for a period of time. And if you've kind of already dug yourself into a hole, it might take a little bit more time before track is really reliable for you. The other thing you mentioned in this email is that you're running out of gas, and I'm not sure exactly what that means. It sounds like it's just general fatigue, but the comment about cardio makes me kind of question that assumption. So if I'm wrong on that, let me know. But generally, this sounds like a situation where we may need to cut the training volume a little bit. So what I would recommend is that you scale back to 1 GPP session per week and skip the priority 4 session. Do this for a few weeks, maybe a couple, 3 or 4 weeks, and see if that helps. See if you're feeling better, see if you're recovering better, see if your stress levels in general in your day-to-day life go down a little bit. Hopefully you have a little bit more time to take care of business. If that helps, let me know. You may need to be moved to a different group than the one that you're currently in. We may need to adjust your training volume. But yeah, that's generally what I see from that, is that we may need to adjust your training volume. We'll start with that and kind of go from there. We'll take this diagnosis a bit at a time. So there's a question that came in now. I want to make sure that I read that real quick and make sure that I'm not missing anything. Okay, so this relates to GPP. It says that I sent this question in earlier. I haven't seen recovery stimulation or passive recovery before in my training plans, so I just need some guidance on what these entail. So recovery stimulation, basically your GPP workout is broken up into chunks, and I'm sure you've noticed this, that there are some chunks that deal with sorry, excuse me while I kind of make sure that my interface is set up here. All kinds of questions now. Sorry. So I need to make sure that I get all these answered before we move on. So recovery your GPP workout is broken up into chunks. So the first chunk is neglected muscle groups, prehab, rehab, stuff like that. Then there's an energy system chunk. Then there's like flexibility, mobility, and passive recovery. So the energy system work will have a given intensity. It'll have something like aerobic development, aerobic maintenance, maybe recovery stimulation or something like that. What these designate, they designate a certain intensity level, and we are going to use a heart rate to determine what that intensity level is. Now this heart rate is going to vary from person to person depending on your age, how in shape you are, and I think those are the main 2 factors, but I'm just kind of going off of memory. So if you look in the startup package that I sent you in the very first week of training, there's an Excel sheet in there for heart rate ranges. You follow the instructions in the sheet and it will tell you what the heart rate ranges are for each of those levels. Okay? So for recovery stimulation, it'll give you a heart rate range for you. And what you'll want to do for anything like that, you just do an activity, whether it's going for a jog or a swim or doing a barbell circuit, just some activity that puts your heart rate in that range for the required amount of time. Now passive recovery is different. Passive recovery does not have a heart rate range because it's supposed to be passive. This is listed in bouts per week. Now passive recovery is stuff like massage, stuff like contrast showers, stuff like stretching, just kind of a little bit of light static stretching, foam rolling, stuff like that. That all counts as passive recovery. Basically it's passive because it's not active. and you kind of do bouts per week for those. If you want some more guidance on that, I would refer to the startup package that you got in the very first week of guided programming. There's a document for GPP instructions, and that should answer most of your questions, but of course feel free to send in any additional questions that you've got. Let's see, next question. All right, Spencer, I see that you sent in a question as far as your video. If you could, when we get to the video section, kind of toward the end of the video section, if you could raise your hand and just remind me to circle back around to pick up that question, I'd appreciate it. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and pick up the other questions that we've got. All right, so let me get back on track here. Make sure I didn't miss anything. All right, so Bo has a contest on April 6th, and he's got a question about the deload week. Basically, he's got a priority 4 workout scheduled for March 28th, and then the deload week stuff. So most of you know that that's going to be openers 5 to 6 days out, and then more or less a warm-up workout 2 or 3 days out, and then proceed into the meet. He's a little bit concerned that that's too much of a drop in frequency and volume, and he wants to add in an extra session. He says he's not feeling beat up, and he sent in his track scores, and they look good as well. Basically, if you're concerned that this is just not going to be enough work, and that you're concerned in losing strength in such a short amount of time, that's an indication that doing a little bit more work is probably not going to hurt you. Yeah, if you're concerned about this, then that eases some of my concerns as well. Basically, if you did decide to do an extra session, we would want it to be triples at around an 8 or 8.5 RPE in all 3 disciplines, possibly 1 repeat set, but we still don't want to add in a ton of volume. The idea here is to allow you to recover and approach each session maximally. It's only a few days, so the volume drop shouldn't hurt you very much. The frequency drop can be a bit to deal with, so I understand wanting to add in an extra session. So one thing that I've done in the past, you can even turn that last session, that session that's 2 or 3 days out, generally just some warm-up work, you can turn that into a little bit of a heavier session and go up to like a triple at an 8 for that last session. What you don't want to do is do a bunch of repeat work. Keep in mind you're only 2 or 3 days out, so you don't want to mess it up. So if you go a little bit heavier in that 2 or 3 day out session, just keep it to around a triple at an 8 and call it good. If you wanted to add in the extra session before you start that deload week process, that's fine as well. Yeah, and since you're recovering well, that's the whole reason why this is an option for you. Also, this is an option for those who are, let's say, 375 Wilks and above. If you're below that level, then you're probably not training with enough volume to need the extra session. The extra session at that point is just going to serve to hurt you. So I would only consider doing this if you're already, say, 375 Wilks or above. You're already training with a relatively high frequency and volume. So that's it for the random questions that we've got for right now. Let's jump into some technique work. So the first thing I need to do is pull up these videos. Alright, so first up we've got James. We're going to watch James's squat, bench, and deadlift from his recent test day. So he sent in these videos. We're going to take a look at those. These are the last successful attempts that he sent in for each lift. So starting off with the squat. Looks good to me. To be honest, there's no real problems that I see. Nothing out of the ordinary, either in terms of weakness or technique. I mean, things look a little bit, any imperfections that we see, kind of come in the form of being a little bit wobbly, but that is something that gets fixed over time, and I mean like over a long period of time. If you look at somebody who's been squatting for 20 years, 30 years, their squats are very crisp and very clean. It's because it takes a long time to perfect a movement pattern to that level. So I don't mean to say like, oh, this lift is perfect, but this lift doesn't have any technical corrections that I think you need to actively pursue. Keep focusing on getting stronger. So James's next video here, we'll take a look at your bench press. This one's not bad. One thing that you may want to consider is taking a big breath in before you take the weight out of the rack. This is something that I do. I don't see a lot of other people do it, so take that for what it's worth, I guess. But I take a big breath in before I take the bar out of the rack. The reason I do that is I feel like I can get more air into my lungs without the weight sitting over my chest. Try it, see what you think. There's nothing I would say is technically wrong about this lift. You do look like you could stand to be a little bit tighter, but that's going to be true in just about every case. All right, let's take a look at James's deadlift. All right, not a whole lot to see from this angle. From what I do see, it looks fine. Now clearly your weak range of motion is toward the top. Let me see if I can stop the video at what I would consider the start of your weak range of motion. I would say probably about that position, maybe just a hair higher. That's where you start to really lose a lot of bar speed. Basically, you're a round back deadlifter, and I mean I clearly can't see that from this video, but almost everybody who's deficient at the lockout is a round back deadlifter. For you, anytime that there's pause deadlifts in the program, I would recommend that you pause in this position. If you pause off the floor, that's not a bad thing. That's still going to develop a strong position. That's still going to carry over to your main lift. But I think pausing in this position is going to help you a little bit more, since this tends to be your weak range of motion. That would be the main difference that I would make to the program. I would leave most other things the same. So let's see, that's it for James's lifts. Like I said, those looked pretty good to me. So let's take a look at Cameron's deadlift. Okay. Clearly you're a round back deadlifter. I'm sure that you knew that already. So let's see what we can see here. Again, this is more or less the position I would consider the start of your weak range of motion. But we notice something as you pass this position. You may rebend your knees a little bit, and you need to be careful of that. It's not very exaggerated in this video, but if it gets more exaggerated, that can be a problem. So yeah, I mean it looks fine. I mean it definitely looks like it would be something that would pass in a competition, but if you rebent your knees and kind of ramped it up your thighs, that would be a problem, and it's something that people have a tendency to do when they deadlift with a round back style. So obviously I'm not saying that you're doing that. It's just something that you need to be aware of, just something to keep in mind when you're form checking your own videos. So also got an interesting couple videos in this week for the squat. So let's take a look at Patrick's squat video. Now this first video, he says they feel deep, but the depth feels inconsistent. So let's go ahead and watch this through, at least a few of these reps. Okay. Now this second video, he says they feel consistent but borderline in terms of depth. All right. So I would say that I generally agree with you. The first set looked nice and deep. The second set looked a little bit, definitely looked a little bit higher, maybe borderline, maybe a little bit high. I would continue to train and work like you do in the first video, not like the second video. You did say that the first video felt inconsistent, and as far as tips for being more consistent, that's a tough one. So if you need to be more consistent, excuse me, sorry for coughing in the microphone. If you need to be more consistent, basically the biggest thing is just to practice. There's not a lot I can tell you as far as tips to make you more consistent. I can tell you that it doesn't look terribly inconsistent from the video that I saw, maybe a little bit, and I'm sure it feels way worse to you. If you just practice, it'll get better. It takes some time for it to get better, but just continue to practice and you'll get there. So I'm sorry, I know that that's not a terribly satisfying answer, but I think that's the real answer. So we do have one last video that came in just while we were talking. So let me pull this one up real quick. Maybe I might be able to pull this up. Alright, got the video up, so let's take a look at this video real quick and we'll see what we can do. So Spencer's benching with a shirt, and we're going to see what we can see in terms of technique. Okay, the second one was definitely better than the first one. And the reason I say that is that in the first rep, it looked like you tried to push back up in a straight line. In the second rep, you allowed the bar to drift back toward the face a little bit more. And the second rep is definitely a much better groove. So the shirt's going to help you get it moving off your chest. And you need to be in that position that you're in, touching low on the chest, elbows tucked. You need to be in that position in the bottom of your bench. Then when you push off the chest, you need to get it back over your shoulders with your elbows out so that you're in a strong position to lock out. So that's why we kind of push back up in that slant sort of bar path. So you touch low on your chest, push it back up kind of in a slant so the bar finishes over your shoulders. As you slant back toward the face a little bit, you drift the bar back toward your face a little bit, you flare your elbows. You did a good job of it in this video. The other suggestion that I would make for you is to use a belt, some sort of a belt, whether it's like your full-size powerlifting belt if you have to. A bench belt is a better option, something that's tapered in the back so that it doesn't interfere with your arch. That's going to hold your shirt down, and it'll help keep the shirt from sliding around and give you a lot more variability in terms of how tight and how active do you want the shirt to be. Now with no belt like this, and I'm assuming that you're letting the shirt collar ride up pretty high, in a situation like that you're going to get the most forgiving kind of groove from your shirt. So it'll give you the least pop from the bottom, but it'll also allow you to touch a lighter weight. So that's just kind of the quick and dirty on shirted benching. If you have more questions, make sure to send those in, and we'll continue to dig in this a little bit deeper. Since you're here right now, do you have any other questions that you want to address, that you want to be addressed from this particular video? Just raise your hand if you're typing something in, and I'll pause for a second and let you finish writing that in. All right, so seems like we're all good for this week. So all right, that's it for the videos for this week. Let me catch up and see where I'm at. I have a couple explanations to give you guys. First question, kind of explanation type of question. Why are we doing sets of 9? What this is coming from is some of the supplemental work goes into higher rep ranges, especially early in training cycles when we're doing developmental type of work. In this particular case, we had some sets of 9 planned. Well, the reason that we do sets of 9 or any sort of high rep work is because we're trying to get additional training volume. We're trying to do more work. We're trying to have kind of just higher levels of training volume. And of course you can get that work from doing multiple repeated sets of 5 or 3 or whatever you want. You could even do singles if you wanted, but it takes a way longer amount of time to do 36 singles with 60-something% of your 1RM. It would be a lot easier to do sets of 9 or 10 reps. You get through it a lot faster, it's more enjoyable, and frankly it's more what most of us are looking for from lifting weights. So it just It just makes sense all around. I know that as powerlifters we tend to shy away from the higher rep type of stuff, but you'll be fine. I promise you won't turn into a marathon runner just from doing sets of 9, and actually it'll probably make you a little bit bigger. So hopefully that answers that question. Trying to keep it a little bit light, but if you want to go more into depth on that, let me know. I'll go as much into depth as I can, but I mean basically that's it. It's a kind of a volume control measure. Next sort of explanation question that we've got is I see sets of 1 at 8 followed by sets of 6 at 9. Why is that? So not all of you are going to see this because it's not present in all of the training groups at this time, but let's take a look at what we're talking about. Get my trusty notepad up here. So if let's say that you get your programming this week and it says squat for 1 at 8, then for 6 at 9, and then let's say you'll do 3 down sets. So what you would do in a situation like this is the first thing you would do is do your single at 8. Now the single at 8 gets you in the ballpark of being an opener. So let's use a hypothetical 100 kilo 1 rep max. So this is going to be right around 90 kilos for 1 at 8. And then you'll go directly from that into your rep work. So 6 at 9, I don't have that end of the RPE chart memorized off the top of my head. Let's say it's around 75%. I think it's a bit heavier than that. But so you'll do 75 for 6 reps at 9, and then you'll do your 3 repeat sets, which those probably should be low drops, but you get the idea. So if you're doing repeats, you'll continue to do 6s, at 9.5 and so on. So really the sets of interest are these two here, those first 2 sets. The question is why? Like, why do we have this in the program? The answer to that is that we're trying to develop sport-specific skills. So what we get from doing that opener is practice with heavy weights, practice doing singles, practice with single efforts, practice for competition technique, even practice with the commands. So we get practice, a whole lot of very specific practice, and I think the exposure to heavier weights is something that it's difficult to overstate the importance of that. It's nice to have that exposure. If you do this for 6, 7, 8 weeks leading into a contest, how confident do you think you're going to be of hitting that opener when you go into the meet? Now, the trouble with this is that if we just did singles, it becomes really hard to get the required amount of training volume in, and it's also it doesn't do us any favors in terms of manipulating intensity. It takes a huge amount of time and it's very stressful. So we follow that single up with rep work. Now 6 reps is kind of on the higher end of the rep work that we'll do with this. So the reps are going to drop down. Most often you'll see 3 or 4 reps for the rep work after your singles. Also sometimes we'll go beyond the single at 8. We'll do singles at 9 as well. But the purpose is generally the same. We want to expose the lifter to heavy weights. We want to also not allow the training volume to drop too much. So that's why we get this combination of singles and rep work. It keeps your training volume up while also allowing you to be exposed to heavy weights. Let's see. So I think that should answer that question. Let me go back to what we were looking at here. And that should be about it. I just make sure that I didn't get any other questions that came in. No, we should be all good. So yeah, that should be all the questions that we had for this week. Thanks everybody for watching. Make sure that you check the calendar for next week's call time. Don't forget to send in any questions that you might have over any of these topics. If you want me to follow up on anything, hit anything again, make sure to just let me know and we'll get that taken care of. Hey everybody, good luck training for this week. Make sure that you're taking what's there, build some momentum, and we'll see you next time.